Here's my take. It's been a head-spinning week for American foreign policy, with tariffs against Canada and Mexico dramatically announced and then suddenly postponed. USAID was gutted, and President Trump said he wants the U.S. to take over Gaza. The most revealing lens through which to look at all this might not be Donald Trump's pronouncements, but rather those of his aides and supporters. The tariff tantrum suggested that foreign leaders are becoming skilled at handling Trump. They mollify him with token concessions, allow him to declare victory, and then return to business as usual. The concessions that Mexico and Canada made were either small bore or policies that they were already pursuing. Mexico agreed to send thousands of troops to the border at the Biden administration's request, and are now doing the same for Trump. In the case of Canada, Trump's own statement notes that Canada was agreeing to implement its border plan, much of which had been announced over a month ago. Some conservative commentators pointed out the obvious. In the words of a Wall Street Journal editorial, Trump blinks. The Fox anchor Laura Ingraham implied that the president caved to huge negative reaction from markets, saying, "I'm not too impressed about the concessions from Canada." Canadian media reactions were similar. Canada's CTV News published an article with the headline, "Canada Takes a Stand and Donald Trump Blinks." The country's satirical show, 22 Minutes, has a Donald Trump look-alike declaring victory.
I did the impossible. I made peace with Canada and ended the unjust trade war that I started. I'm signing this. This executive order, the I did not lose, but I totally won the trade war order.
Of course, from J.D. Vance to Mike Johnson, Republicans fell over themselves to praise the stunning negotiating powers of President Trump. The Trump effect is in full force, Johnson posted. At this rate of achievement, wrote Elon Musk, not only should President Donald Trump be on Mount Rushmore, I want to personally work the chisel. With the abrupt dismantling of USAID, Trump's supporters scrambled to adjust. Secretary of State Marco Rubio quickly blasted the agency, saying it was out of control and unresponsive. This was the same agency that he had repeatedly posted in favor of over the years, written about in his book with pride and admiration, and recently recommended funding increases to President Biden. The pattern is now familiar and was followed after Trump's Gaza announcement. Those who had long supported Trump's determination to end America's military interventions cheered when he announced he would take over Gaza, send in troops if necessary, displace 2 million Palestinians to neighboring countries, and stay in Gaza for long-term ownership. Kayleigh McEnany responded with this on Fox News.
President Trump is playing four-dimensional chess. You all are playing checkers.
Later that day, Trump officials began walking back key aspects of the president's plan, as did Trump himself. If you don't understand all this, you haven't played four-dimensional chess. Donald Trump's White House is now a court, and his courtiers scurry around, aware that the mercurial monarch might change his mind at any time. TikTok is terrible can suddenly become TikTok is great, and they need to pivot quickly. It reminds one of the court of Henry VIII, the monarch who went from being the greatest defender of the Catholic Church to a vicious opponent because he wanted a divorce that the Pope would not sanction. One man who refused to play the game, Sir Thomas More, had his head chopped off. The reason Trump forces aides and supporters to say things that they know are false is to enforce a regime in which loyalty is paramount, overriding facts, overriding your long-held convictions. Now, this might seem like an amusing spectacle, but there is a real cost. In the case of USAID, it will translate into death and despair for millions of the poorest people on the planet. On trade, it remains a mystery as to why Trump singled out Canada. In the 2024 fiscal year, less than 10% of migrant encounters happened at the Canadian border, and just 0.2% of fentanyl seizures occurred there. America runs a smaller trade deficit with Canada than with China or Vietnam. In fact, if you put aside Canadian crude oil, the U.S. sells more to Canada than it buys from it. But the effect is clear. For Canada, the U.S. is turning into an undependable ally, and it will try to lessen its reliance on America and search for new markets and friends, from Britain to China. The largest effect, though, is on American democracy. The scholar Francis Fukuyama has noted that the history of modern government has been a steady movement away from patrimonial rule, the rule of a single strongman to benefit his family and friends, towards rule by institutions and rules and norms. He notes that in the United States now, we are seeing the return to patrimonial rule, as citizens freely debating laws are replaced by supplicants begging the king to favor their interests. Joining me now to talk about Trump, America, and the world is Richard Haass. He is the President Emeritus at the Council on Foreign Relations and a senior counselor at Centerview Partners. So, Richard, let's start with Gaza. You know that region very well. What do you think? You know, there are a lot of people who say, well, this is out-of-the-box thinking. Maybe it stirs things up. What do you think Trump's proposal on Gaza has done on the ground?
It's out of the box, but doesn't mean it's better. Just because the box isn't working. There's policy failures over the years. I think on the ground, Fareed, it probably plays into Hamas's hands. They can say, look, there's no chance of any compromise working. We right all along to be maximalists. For the Israeli right, this is what, a gift from heaven. This is manna from heaven. Their whole policy is to deny Palestinian nationalism. Transfer of people out of Gaza is for them the perfect precedent, because what they really want is transfer of 3 million more Palestinians out of the West Bank, or what they call Judea and Samaria. Plus, it shows, for it even more worrisome, if things get violent enough, it creates conditions which some will then point to and say, we therefore need to transfer. What does that do? It incentivizes the dynamic on the West Bank to become more and more violent. So Palestinians will get more radical, Israeli settlers and defense forces will get more combative. This is not a good dynamic.
So it encourages the radicals on both sides.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And what do you think Trump was thinking? You've talked to him. What's going on?
My own sense is he comes from a world of deals, and you can always sprinkle in new incentives. Oh, if this doesn't work, what about this? What about that? What I think he's missing from the world of real estate is this is not something that can be easily bought off. What are the two most powerful things? You know, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about the Middle East. One is nationalism. Virtually everyone in the Middle East coming out of World War II wanted a state of their own. Zionism was getting a state of their own for the Jews. Palestinians and the Kurds have been denied it. This denies it and kills off the chance. Second of all, it reinforces humiliation. And what did we learn around 9/11 and other times? Humiliation is a dangerously powerful human motivator. So I think this is actually not only going to buy things off, but rather it's going to inflame the situation.
Right. You can't tell a Palestinian family, I'll build you a nicer house in Egypt. What they want is their own country.
100%. Man cannot live by bread alone. The idea that there's going to be a financial sop put forward that's going to assuage the desire for a country of their own is simply preposterous.
What else are you noticing in this? It's been 3 weeks.
Sure.
The fight with Canada, the fight with Mexico. Is there what's the broader implication?
One is being a friend buys you nothing. It's almost like everyone's equal. In some ways, it's worse to be a friend because you have more connections that can then be leveraged. We can threaten your security dependence. We can threaten our trade or investment. The other thing that I notice as someone who's worked for multiple presidents is the lack of anything resembling a serious policymaking process. There ought not to be surprises. You never want to send the president out there to propose something and someone says, well, hold it, did you think about this? And say, take the Gaza thing again. What about the cost? What about troops? What about Palestinian reactions?
And you can see it was unthought through because he himself walked back half of that
within 24 hours.
Yeah.
That's what a policy process is meant to do, to anticipate how's everyone going to react, what's the context, what are the implementation concerns. It may be what seems to be a good idea, but then when you really put it under a microscope, not so good. And that's what we're seeing does not exist in the Trump administration on tariffs. We saw it. You put them on, you take them off. We see it now with Gaza. There's a haphazard quality to this, and a shifting number of players, special envoys here and there. This is not a process that is sustainable.
Now, you talked about the allies feeling there's no point, there's no advantage to being an ally, maybe even a cost. What can they do? Is there a realistic, I mean, what's going to happen?
What I think allies are going to start doing, it'll be gradual, is diversify their portfolios. A country like South Korea is going to have a much more serious debate about nuclear weapons of their own. Other countries are going to say, like Colombia, we don't really want to have 4/5 of our economy dependent on access to the United States. Maybe we dial it down. Maybe, by the way, we bring in China.